Let's get in those headlines with my panel. Deputy Executive Director of the Institute of Public Affairs, Daniel Wild, and media writer for The Australian, Sophie Ellsworth. Well, those words, no plans, give themselves away. He said it on Monday, the Treasurer. She is the Finance Minister, let's not forget. No plans means they can come up with plans at any time in the future.
That's right. We've heard all this before, and I don't think there's any doubt that there'll be more changes to the tax system, whether that's before the election or a plan to take it to the election remains to be seen. There's a couple of things here, Peter, and we touched on this last week. It's clear that Labor feels that it's unshackled from any election promises now.
Yep.
But so too is the coalition in an interesting way. And they now have an opportunity to untether themselves from these stage 3 tax cuts. Important though as they were, politically they're dead. That's not to say that they shouldn't advocate for tax cuts for low to middle or for higher income earners, but they now need to understand that there's an opportunity to broaden out their offerings to Middle Australia through comprehensive tax reform. You know, we talked about family income tax splitting, indexing the tax brackets, a sizable cut for small to medium enterprises. Those kind of offerings, I think, would make much more difference to the day-to-day experience of mainstream Australians than the fairly modest, but nonetheless welcome offering of Albanese. But the other thing to remember here, Peter, is none of this would be happening in the absence of the massive Voice defeat, because it was lower income working class Labor voters that deserted Albanese. He's now trying to win them back, and it's up to, I think, the coalition to present an offering to those people.
I couldn't agree with you more on that point. I mean, the other conundrum here is you've got the Greens, they've got a raft of changes they want. They want a blood price here now. They know Labor have to get these changes through. They have to amend that legislation that was to come in on the 1st of July. And of course, the Greens have got their wish list. But Albanese is vulnerable because half of what the Greens want is supported by Labor's own party room.
It's going to be really interesting, isn't it, Peter, to see how it plays out. But obviously the Greens don't like anyone getting ahead. So they're not going to want the coalition's changes, to, legislated changes to, roll on as they were. But this has put Albanese in a predicament. And as Daniel said, they're desperate to win back these low to middle income earners because the Voice was such a disaster. They know they're in trouble. So now they're trying to appease the public by saying, look, we're going to give you more money to those lower income earners than the coalition would have.
What do you make of that noise around today? 1.7 million Australians are in the gun of Treasury, meaning the government. These are people who have got some sort of trust. It might be farmers with trusts. It might be families with a trust. We're talking about $60 billion. They had this in the kick in 2019 at the election. Of course, Labor didn't win that election, but again, it hasn't gone away, has it?
No, that's right. You mentioned farmers and also small businesses often use this as a mechanism for multi-generational planning, so they'll be hit by any changes. The real interesting thing, Peter, and I was sort of thinking about this, I haven't heard the Prime Minister or the Treasurer talk about growth. They don't have a growth plan, they have a redistribution plan, but there's no plan for how to grow the economy. And there's a mentality of this Labor government that you can only make one group of people better off by making another group of people worse off. Now, if you want to grow the revenue that the government has, the best way to do that is to grow the economy as a whole without having to increase the tax rates there within. So I think that Peter Dutton on 2GB today was spot on when he said basically this is a very divisive government, and rather than putting forward an agenda to grow the economy in the national interest, it's seeking to divide it and redistribute. And so I think the next 12 months will bear that out.
Budget estimates have revealed some, pretty ridiculous spending in the Education Department. None of this is improving our schools, of course, but you've got thousands of dollars on welcome to country ceremonies. You've got really high-end, pricey restaurants where public servants are flashing the nation's credit card. This is the sort of stuff that really angers people, doesn't it, Sophie?
Absolutely, Peter. It's woke bureaucrats are spending money like drunken sailors, and it's our money, taxpayers' money, that they're spending. This never passed the pub test. Why are they having welcome to countries at meetings, and why are they going to lavish restaurants and having expensive dinners? They should be on a really tight budget and showing Australians that they too are curbing their costs while the rest of us are watching our bottom lines.
I've got to ask you about Lydia Thorpe's uncle, the activist Robbie Thorpe. He's now camping out in King's Domain, which, if you're not a Melburnian, a big park, public park.
Yep.
He says he wants that land to be given back to the Aboriginal local people. He did it before about 18 years ago. He sort of got nowhere, but the world's very different now. To me, it has a real stink, Daniel, of what we've seen in the tent embassy in Canberra. So it starts small, More and more activists will join him. And I have no confidence the state government or the Melbourne City Council is going to move him now.
I agree, London to a brick, they're not going to do it. And this is a real test for Melbourne City Council. I think they're one of the worst, if not the worst, councils in the nation. Just walk around Melbourne CBD, you will know what I mean. And this is a test whether they believe in equality before the law. If you or I or Sophie were to set up shop there, guaranteed we'd be moved out quick, fast. And so we should be, because it's, as you say, public land, but because of the claimed racial sensitivities and probably the indigeneity of the parties involved, at a minimum they will go slow. But I think you're right that this could quite easily end up being a semi-permanent setup like they have in Canberra. So this is a test for the Lord Mayor and the Deputy Mayor of Melbourne City Council. Will you stand up for equality of the citizens of Melbourne, or are you going to place and give special treatment to one group based on their race?